evening and welcome to Dog Talk. I'm Dan Camilleri.
And I'm Laura McKillop. We'd like to start by thanking Enduro for their ongoing support in bringing you our live weekly Q&A. Tonight we're fortunate enough to be speaking with Rob Hodgman from FL Working Dogs.
Rob will be picking who he thinks has asked the best question of the night, and they will win a bag of Enduro high-energy food for working dogs with real kangaroo meat. How you going, Rob?
Good, Dan. Good.
Good to hear, mate. Good to hear. That's rolled off the tongue a few times now. We don't even have to look at what we read anymore for that introduction, do we?
No, it's good. It's good after 86 of them. You should be getting used to it by now.
That's it. So, mate, how was your day, Rob? Didn't get up to too much today, you said? A nice relaxing one?
Yeah, not too bad. I sort of got a bit sick down at the futurity, so I don't recover like I used to when I was younger. So, yeah, lazed around, let my wife do all the work, and yeah, it was a good day.
Some would say too much time at the long yard.
Yeah, well, my help did, I think, more than me. And then they insisted on coming in the van for coffee of a morning. So anyway.
Well, from some of the weather I saw up there, it was very cold. So I don't blame him for wanting the coffee in under the heater of a morning.
Yeah, no, it's just the only way you can keep the help happy, I think, is to let them party overnight nowadays. It's pretty thankless task to open horses.
Oh, don't blame him. That's why we go to dogs these days.
They're easier to get around than horses, I can tell you that.
Yes.
And you mentioned the futurity there, mate. Do you want to touch on that? What was that?
It's a cutting horse futurity. So basically, that's what I've done most of my life to earn a living, and it's been really good to me. But my youngest son's taken it over, and my eldest son gives him a hand. So I sort of hoped I could retire and do more with the dogs, because the way it was, the only time I could get to go trial and do things with my dogs was at the end of the cutting season. So I'd sort of do 3, maybe 4 trials a year if I was lucky. And like we said, dogs are easier to get around. I've always kind of had them, just to get the cattle in, and I guess been through a lot of the phases that a lot of young people went through. Always wanted harder dogs, and then I sort of harder, rougher dogs, and then I got them, and then decided that it's not what I wanted, and had to readjust and go again. So it's a constant learning process, I think, and working out what you want to get your job done and to handle your stock the best way you can.
Absolutely. Mate, for the people that don't know Rob Hodgman, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, or where you grew up, and just a bit around you?
Yeah, I guess, I went to boarding school from grade 3. I was born in West Australia, actually, and went over to school at TSS there through to my senior year. So, in those days at boarding school, it was pretty much your life. You didn't get much time off. I don't know, I think we got 4 Sundays and 1 weekend a term to go home.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember the time frame now, but my parents were still in WA when I went to school here, and they were, we had a sheep and cattle property there, and they were basically selling up, but they didn't want to have to relocate me, so they sent me over early to boarding school. And I can't remember if it was a year or more, or before they got a chance to come over. So it's sort of, I guess you grow up different when that happens. You get fairly independent, and it's good and bad, I guess. You probably you're not as attached to family after you do that, but you grow up pretty quick and realize that there's one person to rely on, and that's pretty much yourself. So from there I basically left school and went over to the States and trained rein cow horses, and then come home and set up horse training business. So I sort of trained mostly in the Western side of things, trained sort of everything, and then ended up being lucky enough to make a living just training cutting horses. And there's so many crossovers training a cutting horse to working a dog. It's more similar. I say working a cutting horse, it's working a dog's closer to that than any other equine sport, because, you know, with a cutting horse, you've got to have your hand down, and you've got to rely on that animal's instincts. So there's a fair bit in the breeding. You've got to be able to help him, but if you're doing everything for him, when things get quick, you're too slow. So it's balancing, I guess, having them doing stuff for themselves and you being able to control it. It's getting that balance right, and I think that's pretty much the same as working a dog. So that's basically it. I got married, and we were in Queensland, and then we moved down here to Glen Innes, and you know, it's been a really good spot for us, especially for the cutting horse side of things. Gets a little cold and stuff, but that means not so many people want to drop in and annoy you. It's been good.
So how much time did you spend in the States?
Oh, I spent just over 2 years the first stint, and probably would have stayed there and you know, and lived there, I guess, except, you know, my visa expired, and I've been over a few times now, and the next few times I probably wouldn't have lived there. It's I guess you get used to, you know, the way our country is. It's good for a visit, but I still think, you know, this is the best country, and it's, for me anyway, and lifestyle suited me, and the cutting's big over there and very professional, but I always say it's Queen Street cowboy stuff. You know, they got big pickups, they got fancy ranches and all that, but it's probably just not country enough for me. It's got so professional, and I still think this is a good country. My sister still lives over in Washington State still, so we still have a few contacts and stuff over there.
So did she go across with the horses too?
No, she took a different route. She is a fair bit smarter than me, and she ended up actually working in England for a private PR company, and she anyway, she ended up over there and doing summer camps, because she was a country girl, could shoot and ride and do everything, and she met her husband there. So she stayed over there, and they run a trail riding thing for a while, and she's now back. I've been in for a good while back in the. I can't exactly tell you what she does, but she does a lot to do with their school system over there.
Yeah, rightio.
And what was it about the cutting horses that attracted you?
I guess the challenge. Like, I'd rode a lot of other disciplines where you had to control everything, and it was you had to be talented to do that. Maybe you had to be a little more diligent than I'm used to being. I get bored easy, and the cutting horses, there's so much in the breeding of the animal. Like, it doesn't matter how good a trainer you are, if you don't have the animal, you can't make it work. So it's a two-pronged thing. As much as you've got to work on your own ability, you've also got to work on developing or getting access to the right genetics. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed. So, and they're pretty much like working a dog when it's good. It's amazing how they can read a cow. You know, the great horses I've been lucky enough to ride, you know, probably a handful of them maybe over the years, and they do things that you can't believe. And, you know, I've had maybe 1-2 dogs that I probably didn't appreciate at the time that could do that. And, you know, you look back now and it was, to me, it was wasted. That, like, I could have done more with, or I could have realized how much better those animals were. But at the time, I just thought it was the norm. And then when you go down the track and try to get another one, you realize how lucky you were to have the first one.
Would you say, like, a good cutting horse is sort of similar to, like, a good dog in a lot of ways, that natural instinct, like they know where they should be on that beast and everything? Or is that trained?
No, it's exactly the same. I think the dogs, the good horses and the good dogs seem to be able to work anything. And they've got there's a power there, but there's an acceptance too by the stock. And it's that interaction between the two that I still haven't worked out exactly what that is. You know, I used to think it was to do with distance and, you know, knowing how tight to be on them, how far away. But, you know, it's kind of like, it's like some people, they're just got that personality where people like them. And I think, you know, the good dogs, even when the stock are tough, they have that ability to win them over, not just with force. There's a strength of character there, but there's something else that goes on that, I find hard. You know, the really special horses I've had, and I know we're talking about dogs, but most of my experience has probably been through the horses. Those special horses, they do things that I still can't figure out to this day. You know, I just still can't figure out why they can do it better than some of the other ones I've had. You know, and sometimes like the futurity, which is a cutting horse futurity, when we show them down there, that's got to be the first time they've ever been shown in an event. That's one of the requirements. So it's their first go. And, you know, going down there trying to work out, have you got a good one or haven't you got a good, like a special one, I should say. You don't know till you start to show them. Yeah. You can train them all you like at home. And I think dogs are the same, you know, that you start them pups and they start good. And I've often had a saying where, you know, I believe all the great ones I've had started well, just some of them didn't finish like I thought they were going to. And that's the same with the horses. You know, the great ones just put their hand up. And, you know, it's not always the powerful one. You know, there's something else that's there. And that keeps me interested because I'm still trying to figure that out, and probably got a little too old for the horses now. But I can continue learning about that through dogs.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you came back down to where you are now at Glen Innes, and obviously you got a couple of handy ponies around, and you mentioned your cattle. So did the dogs come in? How did the dogs fall in there?
Well, a lot of my dogs, I don't. I do a lot of weaner breaking, I guess you would say, and some of the weaners are broke, but most of the cattle we work are young cattle, if you like, and to get those. Cattle, you know, people lend you those cattle to work your horses on, and that's a big investment. Like you know, it goes up and down, but there's a lot of money involved in the cattle that come through this place to train our horses. And I've always been, you know, I remember talking to a fellow once, and he's telling me about this good deal he got. You know, he says, I get this, I get this, I get this. And I said, so what does the other people get? Oh, they don't get much at all. And I said, well, that's not a good deal. A good deal is where both parties get something good. And so I've always, you know, tried to look after people's cattle, treat them like my own, handle them like my own. And that's where the dogs come in, because I don't believe the process of training a cutting horse sends the cattle that I have here back as good as they would go back when I work dogs on. Like they go back, you know, and the way I, you know, I try not to kill the lead off. You know, when I had harder dogs, I believe they killed the lead too much, because you always, when you work stock, you always need that one or two head to lead your stock somewhere. If you haven't got control of those hard dogs and they're hammering the lead, cattle will mill and they won't lead out. And to me, I've always wanted the cattle to go somewhere, but at a steady rate. Now, I know there's times when you got to pull cattle up hard, but don't overwork them to the point where they don't want to lead out somewhere. Because you'll have trouble putting them in the race. You'll have trouble loading them on a truck. You'll have trouble putting them into the next paddock. So to me, the dogs are still more effective than a horse for doing that, you know, for controlling that lead. If you're going to do that, you're going to need a lot of riders to get that same effect. And, you know, I basically, when the cattle come here, you know, I like to be responsible for bringing them in, putting them in the yards, taking them away. And then, you know, obviously when they're in the yard, we saddle them, or Tyler saddles them and then works his horses on them. And that process, to me, I want to send those stock, even if they come good, I want to try to send them home better. And it's not that the guys, I'll just have a drink here.
You're right.
Yeah, it's not that the guys that have these cattle are bad stockmen. Most of the owners around here are really, really good. It's the fact that I've got a chance to handle their cattle more than they do, because they're busy doing other things. So when they come here, those young cattle come here, we don't usually bring them up every day, but we might bring them up every second day. There's no way they can afford that time with their operation to do that with those young cattle. So, I believe, that I've been through phases, getting better, getting worse with dogs, and trying to, sort out exactly what I want. And that might change again, like I'm doing a bit more with sheep now, and that's a learning process too, rather than just having trainer sheep. You start working ewes and lambs and stuff, and it's a whole new process. Basically, I try to get the same thing, even loading sheep up a race. I'm careful not to have a dog go so hard that they just jam them into the race. Like there's no way 10 sheep can get through a little gap like that all at once. So again, to me, it's about flow, and keeping your flow consistent and not having any blocks. And that's probably, it'll let me down a little bit, but I don't like much heel in my dogs, and trialing, I sometimes get caught out with that. I often think that if stock are not flowing into the gateway and you just got a dog behind heeling the cattle that aren't going anywhere, they got nowhere to go if the front ones don't move. Yeah. So I'd still much prefer trying to get the leaders to lead out and move on, and then the rest will follow. Pretty much is how it goes. And if I know there's time when you do need heel, but I always think nothing's perfect, and there's a downside to heel, and it'll teach your cattle to kick. You get in the yards and start touching them, and you've had a lot of dogs biting them behind, they'll kick. So and I'm not saying I'm right. That's just what I've discovered with what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So you have to roll your cattle out for your horses just like a trainer mob, like just they get a bit quiet and then opposite probably to the dogs. With the horses, you saddle them, but you want fresh cattle. Once they've been worked a bit, they're not so good to train your horses on. Whereas the dogs, probably young dogs, are better trained on quiet cattle, obviously not cattle that are taking them on.
Yeah,
so it's basically they're sort of the opposite. Obviously, to finish a dog off, I still believe you need real work situations and not just trainer stock, and that's to finish them. But young dogs, especially young dogs on cattle, and especially nowadays where we're wanting them to go so young. Like through most of my time, I didn't have sheep, and I wouldn't even break them in till they were over 12 months old on stock. I'd just take them around and live with them, and they get to know me and that, because I didn't want to get them hurt. And, so they'd be over 12 months, and then they could, they were fully athletic and they could get out of the way and learn their job. But now, we're all getting these little pups going so young. And, that's another thing I say, that, just because a pup wants to show instinct as a little pup on stock doesn't mean that he's ready to train.
Yeah.
Like he, sometimes he shows instinct, but his mind and his body isn't ready to train. So, I say if a pup starts early, which is great, it encourages you to feed him and look after him for another 4 or 5 months before, like you're keen then. But I've seen dogs ruined because they start young and people think that they're going to just keep them going. And they'll either stay in that round pen too long on trainer sheep, and the dog starts to get bolder, or the pup does. And there's no there's no pressure and point of balance because the trainer sheep are working off you as much as they're working off the dog. So I don't mind trainer sheep to start a dog, but I reckon you can stay on trainer sheep way too long. Dogs will start going in tight just because the stock have got no reaction to it. You know, whereas I try to get out of the round pen and off trainer stock as soon as I can. I don't want wild stock, but I want stock that if that pup or young dog goes in too hard, the stock scatter. And he's got to go figure out how to gather them up again. Or he'll learn to feel those pressure spots and get control of where the pressure is. And that'll help you even pull them off balance a bit, you know, without you doing much. If that pup learns where the pressure is and where to be to control them. Whereas trainer stock, you know, some of the stock, you could let a chihuahua off and they'll run at you. You know, they're right there on you. And it's good for the first look or two. But after that, I'm not a big fan of sheep that broke. Apart from the fact that my trainer sheep are wethers that were pets and they need to stand up above my hip. And if a pup gets in there and hoozles them, I'm climbing the fence because they near break my knees when they get to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, some pups are mature early enough to get training early. But I tell people, if you want to see whether your pup's mature enough to train, get him out of the round yard and put him on a bit of a mob in a little paddock. He'll soon tell you whether he's ready to train.
Absolutely.
You know, I've had him look $1 million in the round pen because I'm standing there. I can keep him off. Sheep are at my feet. You let him out in the big pen and you'll see, you know, he might not be quick enough or he could just totally not have the focus you thought he had in that round yard. And that doesn't mean that pup's no good. It just means he's not ready to go yet.
Yeah, that's right. Not right for that scenario, right? Just needs a bit more work.
Well, a bit more age.
Yeah.
You know,
more legs.
Yeah. You know, and the dangers to me sometimes in that round pen, which I've discovered myself because I've used it a fair bit and I've tried a lot of different processes. When you get a young dog, I'm going back to what I used to say about my horses now. When I first get a horse off somebody, I said, look, I don't mind how much you've rode that horse, but don't start him on anything. Don't start him on a cow. Don't start him on the mechanicals. Just give him to me ridden, because I learned that much about that horse the first time I go to stock. Because I always say I want to find out what he has to offer me before I offer him anything. And I think pups are the same. If you get in there straight away in that round yard and you got your stick or whatever you use and you got him away and you're just straight away training. Straight away you're training him.
Yeah,
I'd rather knock him down and see what he does without me doing anything. And that way I can read what I've got to work with there. I can train him down the track, but I don't want to start training from the get-go. I'd rather see how he thinks, how he reacts to his stock. You know, does he run hard and does he get a blood rush and just run into them? Is he maybe just an aggressive style pup? I got a pup recently that when sheep break, he runs hard and wide, but when they slow up, he slows up himself. I can't even stop him. Like, that's nothing to do with me putting anything on him. You know, I'm not too worried about being able to teach the animal what I want. I'm more worried about trying to source those animals that have got stuff that I haven't seen in pups before. That's sort of what I keep looking for anyway.
Yeah.
And that'll help your breeding program too. So I always say you're not breeding to the trainer, you're breeding to the dog.
And that's a very valid and important point too, that I think a lot of people just glaze over.
Yeah, well, especially if you want to breed better animals yourself. You know, you've got to, I think, you've got to have a way of trying to identify quality, and I've took dogs for people at times. I don't I don't really like doing it a lot, but if it's a bloodline or an animal that I'm curious about, those lines, I'll often take them because I want to see for myself what they've got to offer me. And that if people are going to send me a dog, they've usually got to interest me in the way it's bred or something like that. Otherwise, I'm really not that interested. But if it's a bloodline I'm curious about, or a fella bought a pup up at Rocky, and anyway asked me, if I'd train it, and I was going to say no, and then he told me the lot number, and I said, yeah, no, I'll take him because he interests me, and and that's sort of the way I work. Because if a dog isn't interesting me, even one of my own at home, we move them on, and my wife doesn't allow me to do the old routine of putting them in a gully or anything. She rehomes them down the Gold Coast, and they're always kind of after them because we've done all the hard yards and reared them, and they've had their shots, and usually you can call them and sit them or whatever, get them to you. And then, people down there don't have to go through the puppy stage, and they can go do their obedience and all the little social events they want to. So we make no money on them, but, I've said to her, I don't want the word to get out that they get a better life if they don't work, because that'd really interfere with the ones I got here at home that I kept. So, but yeah, sometimes it's not that they're a bad dog. It's just they don't. I don't know. I guess you can say click, or they just don't interest me. So,
yeah,
it just won't get the work it should get.
100%. If you're not on the hook, well, you're not going to invest, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you remember your first dog?
Look, I do. Yeah, it was a blue cattle dog, and I never tried to work stock with her ever. So that was when I was about 18, and she used to get just chained up to my truck as a guard dog sort of thing at the shows, and that's what she was. And then my first proper dog, well, I had a few, but the one that I really remember, and that would have been back in the 80s, and she was sent up to me by a fella called Philip Kirkby, who bred a lot of good animals in his day. He's passed on now, and he wanted me to. He sent her up. I sort of got to know him through a fella that had stock horses for him, and said if I see any. He sent the bitch up, and he said, if you see any dogs up here you think's worthwhile breeding, he said, breed a litter and send me pups down. And I did that for a few years, and she was a Rosedale Turbo bitch. Yep. And she's in a few pedigrees still now today, if you track her back, or track their pedigrees back. And I really liked the bitch, and he just left her with me. But I didn't realize how good she was until probably she'd passed away. Like, she was a proper good bitch, smart. I always thought she was too soft. Like, she had a little nose bite, but that was it. And I used to get different packets of cattle when I was in Queensland from the sale yards. So we might have sort of 60 head out there, but they were drips and drabs from everywhere. And you could send her. I did a stint working at the meatworks, and I'd come back and ride horses after work, and I could send her into the paddock, and I'd just saddle these horses and get them ready, and she'd have the cattle at the gate there. There was horses in the paddock too, never bring them, and she wouldn't miss anything. It wasn't a big paddock, I know, probably only about 90-odd acres, but she wouldn't miss a thing. And anyway, in a pressure situation in an arena, cattle would run over her. Like, she'd nip them, but they would run over in an arena, and she wouldn't run away, but she just didn't have any punch. It was like me hitting somebody, and always wanted something harder and heavier. And so I always used her because she always got the job done in the paddock. And anyway, it wasn't until I started getting those hard dogs that I realised what a mistake I'd made. Like I did. Luckily, we bred a lot of pups out of her, and down on the coast from here, Jimmy Connolly had a pup out of her, and he bred a lot of dogs out of her. And everywhere I went, we went down to Yugelbar Station, and I see a black dog down there, and I said to my oldest son James, I said, I like that. He was a young dog. I said, I like that dog. I said, we need some new blood. I said, why don't you go join your bitch to that dog? Anyway, we find out it goes back to the whole bitch anyway. I just didn't get back through down the coast. Yeah, so sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for, and maybe realise what you got. I guess if you're a perfectionist, you can always find fault or things you'd like to change with what you've got. And you look over the fence sometimes and you think, geez, I'd like something just like that. And then when you go live with it, you realise it's only you didn't know its faults, and that's why the dogs I breed to, I'd rather breed to a dog I've got because I know it. I know the ins and outs of it. Or a dog that I've seen a lot of. I find it very hard breeding to dogs that I don't know much about. I find it tricky.
You just described to me.
I know a fella I'd spent time with in the States said to me when I was 18, he had a saying. He said, you know what? He said, if we could all put our problems in a pile on the floor there and you could grab anybody's problems, he said, always grab your own because you know best how to deal with them better than anybody else. And I always thought that was good advice. We've all got our problems, but nobody knows how to deal with them as good as you do yourself. Yeah, and I think that's the same with dogs.
That's good advice. Fantastic advice.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask before, you've spoken a bit about your genetics and breeding dogs. Where did the FL come from? We sort of mentioned it earlier, and you mentioned there was a bit of a story behind that.
Well, there was. It sort of started with the horses and the place we sort of went out on, and I remember saying it's a fine line. It's whether this will work or it won't. And we sort of got to be a bit of a thing we used to joke about. So we actually called our first stables Fine Line, and that's where it come from. But that was the reason. We were pretty young, and when we just got married, and I'd left the meatworks, which was really good income, and had to kick off on our own, and I, at the time I didn't know, whether it was going to work or not. And I said, oh, well, it'll be a fine line as to whether this will work out. And so that's how we come. And then I shortened it just to FL. And actually, the horse side of it, we're in a partnership with a vet down in Euroa, and we call it Extra Fine Line.
That's really cool. You get some good horse names from that too, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I've always been a little the horse names. Sometimes I don't sleep a lot, and I get bored with lots of different things. I tend to I listen to every sort of music, and so the names come from everywhere. Like the one mare we named, and that was part of Stace's thing. We named all her foals after grasses, and then I went through a bit where I was listening to blues and music, and so we called one of our horses Blue Tunes, and so the names just come random. I'm fairly random with what I do. I get bored like doing stuff, and I often say I've got the attention span of a sparrow. I sort of go here and there.
How about the dogs' names? Have you carried on that trend?
No, my grandson names a lot of them. We had a pup here, and it was by my dog out of a guy's bitch, and it arrived here, and my grandson said, I said, oh, I have to name this pup. And he said, oh, yeah. And he said, how old is he? And I said, oh, he's not 1 yet. And he said, oh, so he's 0. We'll call him 0. So he names a lot of them. Like, I just let him go. And, I've always said with horses and, with dogs, the name doesn't make the dog makes the name, and the horse makes the name. You can have the most ridiculous, Mackay Diva. You can have the most ridiculous name, but not many people don't know that name. So it's a horse that makes the name. You can name a horse anything, and if it's a good horse, people will remember it. And I've named horses over the years, proper cool names, and they were never any good, and can't even remember the name now. It's cool.
I love it.
So, would I be accurate in saying like most of your camp would be collies?
Yeah. I guess they've suited me because I haven't had like massive acreage, and they're probably a little easier, younger to get along with, probably not so high energy for what I wanted to do. And I've sort of tracked them, and then like some of the UK dogs have really interested me for reasons. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, still like the UK dogs, or like this or that," and they don't really understand how I think.
Sorry, can I cut you off for 1 sec, Rob?
Yeah.
Because there's a question here from Nick Hovey, and you're about to talk about it because you sent it to me last night, and he just has asked, you wanted to touch on your initial bloodlines and what you have, and why have you shifted from the crossbred lines that worked for him in your program for so long to a UK-based style of dog?
Well, I think I've tracked what I'm looking for from the UK dogs is I think they got power. They're a little more direct in the way they work, and they seem to listen. And there's good and bad. Like if you get the right lines, they understand commands, mechanical commands a lot better. Meaning, they listen, and I think some of the New Zealand dogs are the same. They listen as well right in front of you as they tend to a long way away from you. Whereas what I'd been experiencing with some of the lines I was using, the further away they got, the kind of less they wanted to listen to you. That in itself is not a bad thing either. Like I think environment and production practices is what develops dogs. It doesn't matter where you are. Meaning the UK more intensive, a lot more open country than a lot of places in Australia. And I think the Australian dogs have been developed, and the dogs that have been rated are the dogs that can think more for themselves, where you can't see them. And but with that independence, which I'm not saying is bad by any means, with that independence often comes, they don't always like being told what to do as much. Whereas the other dogs, the UK dogs, to me, they can put them on a dime and move them around, and they're not so dictated to. They work probably what I say more of a 360 right around their stock, where in Australia it's still like a no-no. Oh, they cross in front of you, you're out, especially in the trials. And, they work pretty much only what I call a 180. It's all our trials over here, like the 3 sheep. Sheep only got to jump across the top of your dog. Done. The dogs, cross the sheep. Well, actually, the sheep might have crossed the dog, but either way, you're out. In the UK, obviously, they cross drive. And to me, they can work anywhere around a mob, so they can sit here, drive them away, put them anywhere. And I know our good handlers in Australia can do that with their dogs, even the 3 sheep guys. I've seen Greg Prince doing it. But the nature of our, I guess our contests are that it's not allowed. And I think when you get a dog that you can work the whole way around the mob, not because I don't want to cross on the cast or anything like that. I just, unless I ask for it, I just think that a dog that works 360 degrees around stock, and that is the way that it's accepted for us to work stock, the dog's more complete because he's not dictated to so much by where the lead's going all the time. Whereas a lot of our dogs over here are strong lead dogs, but sometimes you battle to pull them off the lead. You know, they're going to the lead, or my dogs were anyway. And like I had some very, very, you know, like, well, pull stock up. There's no problem about that. But if stock went through a gate and some started to take off, you better look out for where your dogs were, because you'd be still trying to feed cattle through the gate and your dogs would be gone up the lead, pulling them up. You know, and then if it's a small gate, some are heading down the fence line here, especially if the cattle have gone through the gate, took off over here. You know, so you know, first thing you got to do, you might be able to send one to the lead, but you might need to keep one back here. So I think you need to have a certain amount of control. And if you bring stock in the same way day in and day out, you don't have to have much handle on a dog at all. He'll learn the lay of your place. You know, you bring them the same way, but you try and change that one day. And if you don't have that handle, like he just like looks at you like, no, we bring them in here and we take them over there. And that's what I think, you know, the UK dogs have to offer. But I will tell you, I don't think on the whole, and again, I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about as a group. Yeah. They probably don't have the stamina that we often need over here, you know, especially in our hotter climates. And, you know, I believe that's where obviously the Kelpie and stuff come into their own. And, you know, they're better traveling dogs. And on the whole, I'm not saying you won't get a collie that'll travel, but if you look at them as a group, I think they're softer going dogs. So it's, you know, to me, it's not one's better than the other. You got to find out what fits, what your operation, I guess, is what I'm talking about, and what you want to do. And it's like, you know, there's horses and horses. If I want to win the Melbourne Cup, I don't have a single horse bred on the place that's going to do that. Yeah. You know, but those guys that breed in them race horses, they want to go try and win a cut in futurity. None of theirs are going to do that either. And, you know, I read something the other day, which I agree with, you know, even when people talk about all-rounders and all the rest of it, it's the old saying, one size fits all doesn't usually fit anybody. You know, it's, to me, you know, I'd rather have a dog that's really good at this and a dog that's really good at that than a dog that's pretty good at both. That's just the way I feel, you know, and everyone's got a different idea. You know, they want a dog to go work cattle, work sheep, work the race, you know, but I want probably something that's, and I'm not saying I've achieved that yet, but I'd look for something that's exceptional, you know, in that area. Something that those people will talk about that dog as how good it is, or that horse, how good it is in that area. And, you know, but again, that's just my take. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but, you know, it's not hard to feed an extra dog if you want a dog to work the race and then you want a cattle dog. It's only one extra dog, isn't it?
That's right. What attributes or style of dog are you trying to breed these days?
I guess I want power. What I'm working on at the moment is that power within the last foot, without you like for cattle anyway, without a bite unless you need it. You know, a lot of dogs, when they get within a foot of stock and they're threatened, you know, they take the offensive. So probably what I'm trying to say is maybe more of a defensive bite. But I want a dog to, you know, to get up there in their face, but not, you know, I guess go too hard too soon. And a dog that's settled, and I'm looking for that elusive dog that has like we talked about earlier, has that ability to take cattle that you might think it won't handle, and it handles them, meaning it's that X factor I don't know about. I don't know how to describe. I've seen it, but I don't know how to pick it. Same as, you know, picking pups and that. I've tried everything. And usually I can't say that I've got a system that's foolproof. You know, probably the best advice I ever had was a guy that when I was young that helped me when I did a little bit of trialing. and I asked him about picking pups, and he took me out. He ran off a generator. He was out the back of Toowoomba there, had no power, no nothing, ex-light horseman. And there was a litter of pups in the stable there. And I said to him, so what pup would you pick here? And he just looked and he said, that pup right there. And I looked at it and I said, well, why would you pick that pup? And he said, because that's the best looking pup in there. And I said, so what, it's going to work the best? He said, no, but he said, you'll always get rid of a good looking pup. Somebody will want it. And same with horses. You know, if you've got an ugly horse and it works, that's fine. But if it doesn't work, it's just an ugly horse. But if you've got a good looking horse and it doesn't work, somebody will say, shit, that's a good looking horse, you know, would you sell it to me?
Yeah.
And you always get rid of it. And that's probably still the best. I've squeezed toes. I've done a lot. I've checked the black roof in their mouth, and I've been through it all. And the best pup picker I got is Christopher. He goes in there and sits with them, and he'll say, I like this pup. And I'll go with that one every time. And I reckon 8 times out of 10, he's been right. So maybe he's got the knack I don't have.
Just keep getting him to pick them.
Yeah.
Want to talk a little bit about your current team?
Yep. Well, it's kind of up and down at the moment. I've got I've got some that I don't mind for the, the cattle job. I've got some that are okay, I guess, just my work dogs. A couple I want to, I'm trialing, but then I wanted to get better at trialing. So I've gone to a few 3 sheep days and tried to learn it, because a little bit more about that. And I've learned a lot just going there. But then I kind of got the bug for it. So I thought, I might do a bit of this 3 sheep trial. And so now I've kind of bred to a 3 sheep dog, because I realised you need a slightly different style of dog than I was working with. And so I guess at the moment I'm in a real transition period, because I'm still trying to breed something. I'm trying to keep it a bit separate, but then I've got to use what I got to go to another step too, So, yeah, I'm probably in the middle of things. I've got a couple litters now that are probably, more cattle bred, but then I call them a crossbred litter, where I bred one of my cattle, like collies, to a 3 sheep dog, and they're not really old enough for me to get going with at the moment. But we'll wait and see. So yeah, at the moment I told you I got bored. I got the concentration of the sparrow, so I kind of jumped. From a breeding point of view, there'd be a lot of people around, way more distinct with bloodlines, and somebody said to me, about my horses and things, and they said, we like your line of horses. And I always say, that's kind of pretty weird, because I said, I've only just took everyone else's lines and played around with them. You can't invent the working dog. So I don't like to think I've got a line of dogs. I don't. There'd be other people that have been doing it for generations, and their fathers might have been doing it for, too. And they'd be a lot more beneficial to talk to about that sort of thing. I just steal what I like and what I see people with, and then play around and jumble them in. And, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So, yeah, I'm probably not dead set, not a guru in that area, as far as I know what I want. But life for me now is too short to I'm going to have to play around a bit and to get where I want this, otherwise I'll, I won't get there. I've gone a fair bit further down the track with the horses, because I started more seriously with them because it was my business.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So have you got a go-to dog at the moment?
Again, it depends on the job. I've got a little bitch there that's good with the ewes and lambs, and she's probably the best I got on sheep, and the others are decent. And then I've got a wide-headed bitch here that I didn't breed that's got a fair bit of punch, and she can be a bit headstrong sometimes. But if my cattle are a bit tough, she's my go-to dog there. And then I've got a couple I say like refined. If the cattle are not too bad, I can put them exactly where I want and get things done. But yeah, I I guess so. I'm still a work in progress when it comes to that. And I just hope I've got the right one on the buggy when I go to do a job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about having a couple of different litters there. Is breeding pups something you enjoy, or just a necessary evil to get the dogs you like?
Yeah, obviously, I think anybody I enjoy breeding them. I don't just breed them for the sake of it, meaning, I want to I don't want to be a puppy factory or anything like that and just churn them out. I've got to have a reason for trying things. And then, I've always, with everything I've done, like I'll have ideas, and I usually overthink things, and I've got a reason behind what I try to do. And then when it doesn't work, or it looks like it doesn't work, it doesn't worry me. I say, well, that didn't work, and I move on. If you're not willing to make mistakes with what you're doing, then you'll never achieve anything. You've got to just get out there, and as long, to me, you've got to have a reason for joining two dogs together, not just, I might be able to sell a few pups here and breed a few. I sort of have a reason. And again, sometimes it works good and sometimes it doesn't. And then in a litter, they're not all the same. And I'll even play around with a well-bred bitch that maybe wasn't as good as I thought, and use as a brood bitch, because I know with the horses, it's not always I hear a lot of people say, oh, if it wasn't a good bitch, why would you breed from her? And I'll say to them, well, if she's really well bred and a few of her siblings are doing good, I'd breed from her. I'd give her one go, breed a litter, because sometimes, I speak to people and they said, oh, I had a bitch, and I'll say how good she was and that. Yeah, never bred anything though, she just great dog, but never bred anything. And sometimes it's the sister that wasn't as good, that they don't join because they didn't think she was as good, that could be the breeding animal. Genetics they're tricky, like if genetics are sound and that individual just doesn't necessarily live up to her genetics, don't be frightened to maybe breed a litter and see, because she could be the brood bitch. She could be the one that bloody sets you on the thing. And I mean, you see it in the racehorse game all the time. It's not always a big, superstar that breeds on. She was a great individual, but might not be the one that breeds on. But usually the good ones are well bred. That's the trick. They look well bred, but they just might not have lived up to their breeding initially, but they just skip a generation and off you go again. So, I think, you got to look at the genetics and how the dog's bred. And if there's blood in there you like, don't be frightened to try it at least once anyway. It costs you nothing really. When you've dealt with horses like I have, breeding dogs is cheap. If you got a horse that didn't win anything and well bred, it's going to cost you bloody anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 in the horse game, in our cutting horse game, to try it. So that's a gamble. Everyone says, oh, she won nothing. And then all of a sudden you got to wait for the foal. And then if it turns out to be good, all of a sudden she's a producer. There's a mare in America that was a surrogate. Like, she was just carrying other mares' foals, and then they ended up breeding her, and she's one of the legends of the industry at the moment over there. She carried other foals for a while. I don't think she won enough herself. And then somebody just joined her, and then off she went, and now she's a legend as a producer. So,
isn't it crazy?
Yeah, and that's why I always say to people that, it's if it was that simple, that you just bred the best to the best and got a champion, everyone would have one. It ain't that simple.
No, not at all. And while we're talking about breeding, and you mentioned pups early, have you got an age that you like to start them? And I know you said earlier there, at 12 months old, you still didn't want to see too much from them, or you weren't even starting them there. Has that changed at all for you?
Yeah, look, I guess the world we live in is fast food world. Like in the day, I didn't breed many pups, and I could wait till I was 12 months old. It didn't worry me. Now we've got more, I'm trying to look for a special dog, so I'm breeding more dogs, trying more dogs. And if you're going to do that, you know, and you'd say to somebody, oh, I got a pup here, you know, and it's 4.5 months old, and you know they want to buy it, and you say, yeah, it's doing nothing yet. People kind of aren't going to want it. So then maybe at 12 months, it is doing something, and they'll take it then. But that's a fair bit further down the track. So it's a fast food world. So I like them to show interest, you know, reasonably early. But that doesn't mean to say I want to train them that early. But like I said, it encourages me to keep them, feed them. And then if you want to sell one, you drop it down and it goes to work early, you know, and wants to do a bit. They're easier, you know, if you've got a litter of them, they're easier to sell. You don't have to hang on to them. You know, I think the kiss of death for me has always been trying to hang on to too many pups in a litter. You know, like I think if I only keep 1, 2 at the most in a litter, that's plenty, because something's going to miss out. Like if you keep the whole litter, some are going to become favourites, some aren't. And then they miss out on the extra stuff, not the work, that cart them around, you know, put them on the buggy when you go to spray. You know, they'll miss out on that. So I don't like having a lot of pups at the same age around me, because a good part of my program is, you know, making sure they're mates with me and I can do a lot before I go to stock. You know, if I go to stock early, I might drop them down once when I can't call them to me. But that'll be it. You know, I see people dropping pups down and then they create a fire in them pups to where they can't get them off stock. You know, because they haven't never taught them to come. And you know, they go do clinics and these pups are just they're that keen, but they can't even get them to come off, you know. And I said, if you know, to me, the first thing you got to have is be able to call your pup off stock. And in saying that, that's what I do at home. I always talk about being able to call a pup with no distraction, meaning just out in the open. You know, I'm spraying weeds. I'm the only thing he knows there. I can get him to come. I let him get used to that. Then the next thing is with distraction. And usually I've got dogs tied up on posts and, you know, little pups wanting to run over and play with them. And I want to be able to say to call him, and he's wanting to go play with that pup, and I need to make him come to me. When I can do that, then when I go to stock and he's really excited about working stock, I can call him off. Because if I can get him to me, I can shape him, and I don't care about stopping one. I've got to be able to call him to me. That's the first, to me, the primary deal. And then the other thing, you know, we tend to make a mistake with a lot with young pups is we let them work and then call them to us, pick them up and, you know, pat them and off we go. In a session, let them work, call them to you, pat them, make a bit of them, then go back to work with them again. Let them work 2 or 3 times with a call off in between. And then your call off becomes part of the work, not the end of work. And if the call off's the end of work, it's like a dog that's playing and you stand near his chain and you're going to put him on the chain and he looks at you. Well, I don't want to go on the chain. I want to keep playing. And that's why they don't come, you know. So, you know, sometimes I'll do that. I'll be playing and I'll call them over to where the chain is and I just pat them. I don't chain them up and I let them go. I don't just call them the one time I want them and off I go. Because you'll teach a pup that stuff is the end of whatever they're doing. And that's the same. You got a pup keen to work stock. You don't ever want him to think that coming to you is the end of his work. It's just part of the work. I call him over, pat him and say, let's go back to work again. Then he's happy to come to you because he doesn't think it's all over. And you know, you got to understand that those keen pups, that's like candy to them. And it's the same with horses. Like, it's no different, you know, that I'd rather work a horse 2 or 3 light sessions than one session and then put him away. You know, it's they don't take them long to figure stuff out. And it's just, and you need to put that in place young before you do anything. You know, it's you know, as I said, it's like you start the fire in that pup, and then before you know it, you've burnt the neighbourhood out. I mean, you can't stop it. It's just, you know, and then you got to really towel him down to stop him from working or corner him. You're there diving around in front of the stock, trying to stop him from working. It's great he's keen to work, but it's your mistake that you're doing that because you've created too big a fire and it's got out of hand. So realise, keen pups, every day you take them there, they're going to get keener. That's what'll happen. So make sure you realise where things are going and get ahead of the game. And that's, pretty much all training's about that. I think the thing that you can't learn off videos and is that understanding of where this horse is going to be in 4 days' time, or where that dog's going to be in 4 days' time. You're just looking at what's happening here. You're not letting him work here thinking, in 4 more days, I'm going to have a problem here. And that, to me, training isn't about teaching. It's about not letting bad habits develop. That's the bottom line, like keeping it pure. And that's why you've seen it happen before. You think, oh, yeah, I know what'll happen. He does something good, but you can see him starting to take over on you. And you think, oh, this is going to get out of hand if I keep, and today it looks good. But in 3 days' time, he's got away on you. And to me, that's all training is about. And that's why that's experience. You can learn shit like on videos about technique, but timing and feel, you got to do it to figure that out. Just got to get in and do it.
Great advice. Fantastic advice.
Definitely. Oh.
Do you want to get that one?
Yeah, there's a question here from Nick Hovey.
You're right.
Yeah, I just feel a bit crook. That's
all. I noticed.
What's your opinion on line breeding in the working dogs?
I think line breeding in anything is probably you have what I call a purple patch, meaning if you can consolidate those genetics that you're after, then you'll have a purple patch, but it's got a lifespan too. You keep line breeding, you start to lose quality in your dogs. You might keep the work ethic good, but your bone and structure and a lot of things go out. But while it's happening, and I'm not going to say what the lifespan is, but some of the best animals, and the same in our cutting horse industry, have been line bred. But you've got to realise that there is a lifespan, and somewhere you're going to have to maybe go backwards to go forwards again. In other words, you've got to introduce something. And it's been hard for me to line breed, even with my horses. And people have done it with my horses and had success. And I could have done it, but I've as much as I've wanted to carry the good things on, I knew the faults, and I was trying to get rid of them too.
Yeah.
If you understand what I mean. And that's what's hard. So I guess I'm a bad critic in as much as I don't want to, I'm trying to get better. And I believe the greatest thing with line breeding on the whole is consolidation. You're consolidating what you want. And I don't know if I've got to the point where I'm happy enough with my article that I want to actually consolidate it.
Yeah.
Always to try to improve. But there is no doubt that if you're maybe further down the track than me, that line breeding can produce some of your better animals. But you just got to watch that don't get smaller and lighter boned.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that with a lot of line breeding articles at the tail of their purple patch. You say, that's a such and such bred dog. And you look at it and you think, geez, it doesn't look that good. It might work the house down, but they've kind of gone through the great period, kept line breeding, and started to dwindle away a bit. But, in all honesty, with most of what we're doing with the horses and even the dogs, I guess, there's not as much scope as you like to think. Meaning if you want to start like dogs, because I guess you've bred so many pups in a litter, the horses, the embryo transfer, like it's been great to us. It's, been a great period for us, but it's narrowed your genetics. And that's what, one of the reasons a racehorse game won't allow that to happen. Because you can, with embryo transfers, some of your mares can have 3 foals a year. And then their daughters can do that, and their daughters can do that, and their daughters can do that. And before you turn around, everything is related. And we, like America's bred some really good cutting horses. Like the horses, there's more better horses now than when I started, but they have carried through a few of the things you don't want to. And I mean, that's why with the collies now, you know, you go to Oravet and get them tested, and like you look at the UK and they got a list this long. They're even doing hip shape on them. So that tells the story itself, doesn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
When you're doing that. So again, I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's not a perfect nothing in life. There's trade-offs to everything you do, you know, and that's life in general. There's always a trade-off. If you're prepared to pay the price, it's all good. Do anything you want.
Yeah. So how do you go about picking dogs to join and even to horses? How do you go about picking?
You join a dog to a horse?
No.
Yeah.
That's a new type of line breeding.
That's
No,
a whole breed altogether.
It's if I see something I like, and that can change, you know, I see something I like, I'll just go pursue it and try it. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of it's just gut feeling at the time. And again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And, you know, the one thing that's probably helped me with the horses and the dogs is that I don't try to get to have favourites, and I wouldn't breed to, you know, his dog because I don't like him, or I wouldn't breed to his horse. I just focus on the animal. I don't care who owns it or whatever. And if it's available, I'll breed to it. And that's what I said. I don't like saying my line of dogs. I put a prefix on them, but I don't really have a line of dogs. You know, I'm pretty random. I just try to breed better animals, and I'm not conceited enough that if I see an animal, I think, shit, that's really good. It's better than anything I've got. I'll go breed it. You know, I think I want some of that. So, you know, and you know, you got to go live it. You got to hang around with people that you respect. And I know growing up, you know, one of my mantras used to be, you know, all I wanted, I guess I used to say to people, all I wanted to be was respected by those that I respect. And that's all. Simple as that. You know, like, and that's the same. I'm not in competition with you know, like when in the contest, if I'm trialing, I am, but in general, I'm not in competition with anyone else. Like if they're breeding good animals, they're doing what I like to do, and they're the people I want to be with, and they're the people I like to talk to, you know, and they're the people I learn off. So, yeah, I don't, you know, I'm willing to go listen to anybody, and I watch, and, you know, I believe that you can't have too much information, whether you decide to use it or not. That's up to you.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're hanging with people that are passionate about what they do, there's always something to learn there, you know, and that's what you got to do. You got to hang with the people that are passionate. They don't have to be the best of the best. They got to be passionate.
Yeah, for sure.
Because passion is what, and there's so many, you know, you've got people that just want mustering dogs. You've got people that love sheep dogs. You've got people that got trial dogs. Like, they're all passionate. And like fella that just wants hard mustering dogs, you know, say, them freaking trial dogs, want nothing to do with them. And that's fine. He's passionate. The other fella's passionate. They're just on different roads. And to me, that's good. I like hanging around with people like that. And I don't want anything too standardized, because that basically narrows your gene pool. If we all thought exactly the same, we'd have nowhere to go. You know, it's good that this fella likes a harder dog, and this fella likes a softer dog, and this fella likes this sort of dog. This, to me, that's healthy. That's healthy, because, you know, at this point I might be pursuing a path where I want a softer dog, and then, you know, I might get to the end of this, to the crossroads, and decide, shit, I don't think I wanted them that soft. You know, like you just pursue, have a reason for where you're heading, and but I'm not. You know, people will say to me, "Oh, but you know, 5 years ago you were trying to develop this." I said, "Yeah, well, yeah, I had to go at it. Found out that exactly wasn't what I needed to do, or you know, as you get older, your tastes change, and you know, that's just, you know, I think that's good."
I think the other day we were having a chat, and you mentioned sometimes inexperience is bliss as well.
Yeah, I still believe that. I've seen some people, again, mainly in the horse industry, because that's, where I spent most of my time, but I've seen them with very little knowledge breed some unbelievably good horses. And I wouldn't have bred the way they did what they did, because I've got too much knowledge to do that. And it worked, and I think, there you go, like the less you start out doing something and you think, this is challenging, but I'll get a handle on this. And sometimes you have a little bit of early success, and then you think, yeah, a bit more work and I'll get this. And then a year and a half later, you think, I'm worse than when I started. I'm doing worse than when I started, but it's only that you know more. Now, back then you just didn't know as much. So, I still think that, sometimes, I'm the king of overthinking shit. And but it's just the way my mind's geared, and again, that's the other thing, I always say to people, you got to be true to who you are, not to who somebody else is, or, and I guess it comes down to what I talked about, your troubles. As you get older, you get to know your own faults, and you can deal with them, better than anybody else. That's why I've never, I used to joke when I was younger, that with mates of mine, and they'd say, what do you want for birthday present? I said, I'd love to have a session with a psychiatrist, because I just like to play with one for an hour. And, like it's to me, and I'll probably get screamed down for this, but, nobody knows me as well as I do. And I know the ins and outs, the goods, the bads, and the uglies. And if anybody's going to give me advice, it better come from me, because nobody else knows enough about me to tell me that. And, I'm happy with that. That's what makes the world go round.
And we've spoken about, you mentioned faults there a few times, and everything has faults, right? But when it comes to a working dog, what faults are you prepared to work with?
I think, well, I'll say I love a natural dog, but if a dog's trainable, you can still make a really good dog out of it. So if a dog lacks some what I call some traits that I'd like to see him do naturally, be it, say his understanding of distance and stuff on stock. If he's trainable, you can help him with that. And if he does it often enough with your help, he'll get better at it. So I think you can overcome a lot of things if a dog's trainable. And horses are the same, and people are the same. Trainability and being able to shape something is important. And yeah, you can. I see a lot of dogs. I guess on a given day, you'll go out and work, and a dog will do something, and you'll think, geez, I wish I'd had a bloody video camera to record that. But then equally as much, some days go out and the dog does something, and you think, geez, I hope nobody is watching that. And they're a bit like us, they don't always put their best day ahead, up. And so, I'd like to say to you, I wouldn't own a weak dog. But, then I go talk to a few 3 sheep fellas, and sometimes they said, look, this dog is a bit weak, but more times than not, he'll put them round without busting them. So in that scenario, you can probably get away with a weaker dog. So it depends what, the biggest thing is, I think, with everything is that we've got there's usually a niche for every dog, and if you've got a dog that's too weak on cattle, maybe he's got another job. If you've got a dog that's a bit crazy, like I got a dog an old red dog here that I got a really good handle on, and he is over the top when you go to get him to do something. And I don't work him much anymore. He's retired. But last year, or end of last year, we had all that rain, and my collies had all these cattle on the other side of the creek, and there was a big flush in the creek, and I couldn't get them across, and I had to drive home, not far, with the buggy. And I got the old red dog, and I sent him over there. Well, he into these cattle, they fell in the river and had to swim across. And I would have been there all day with my collies, because my collies don't heal. they just pointed their heads at the river and stood there, and they go around the side and they go, and in that scenario, those dogs look useless. And he went over there and he has like a strong double tap on the heel. And I mean, he had them jumping over the top of each other and something fell in. But then I can send him down here on some broke weaners, and he'll see one break and you'll think, go, and he'll let it break. And then he would just go hammer it, because he loves the sport, and that annoys the hell out of me. Hey?
The thrill of the chase.
And that annoys the hell out of me. So, in one scenario, if you'd seen me the day I was there on the river and I dropped him off, you'd say, well, lucky you had the red dog. And I'd say, yeah, lucky I had him. But then you see him go there and he brings cattle up and they've got blood noses and stuff like that on cattle that didn't need it. And I just shake my head, I think, you bastard. So, everyone has their moments, it's some of my best mates and that, really good people and different things. But, I probably wouldn't want to be in the trenches with them. We're all too soft, if it was a real fight. So, it's horses for courses.
Definitely. Question here from John Starr, and it's back when we were talking about the UK lines. He said, when you say the UK lines listen more, is it a sacrificing?
Is it a sacrifice?
Sacrifice
of natural
I can't read it.
Is it a sacrifice of natural ability, or can it be blended in without losing the natural?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to blend the two, like I use them and I'm not saying they don't have dogs over there that I hate to bundle. It's like saying Australian dogs are bundling them into one bundle. Like, it's still so diverse. I say to people, try and chase traits, and there's no doubt that your farming practices develop the tools. Like, ultimately, the dog's just a tool for us to get our, if you're not trialing, and even then it's still a tool, but ultimately it's used to get our job, make our job easier and be efficient. Now, if you've got certain country, a dog that's going to be really good for you is going to be what you want for that country. Somebody else with different country, different scenario, different mob sizes, it's a totally different deal, So you've got to work out what traits you want. And I think you can. And I think the special dogs, they can do it all, be it here or in Europe. Or the States or New Zealand. You just don't find that. I mean, if you've got high expectations, there's just not that many of them, that, if you know what I mean. Like, those special dogs, you even talk to the guys that have been through a lot of them, they can usually name, probably 3 or 4 at the most that they considered were like proper special. So I'm not saying they're not out there. They're just not that easy to come by. So yeah, in answer to that, that's what I try to do. I want a dog that'll think for itself, but then I can also control it. But I do believe that a lot of like, if you've got open country and you've got a handle on your dog, you can gather stock together pretty easy. The thing, sheep will gather easier than cattle. Yeah. Like, if you got cattle spread out in a paddock, the dog often has to put pressure on those cattle to get them to come. Yeah. Sheep, the presence of a dog, they tend to get together.
Turn to a big magnet.
Yeah, so if the dog's wide and they feel him, they'll come together, short of being too wide. Cattle, though, that dog might actually have to lift those cattle and then break and go get another group to put them together. They don't all necessarily when they see a dog, they don't go poof and run together. So you need a slightly different dog for cattle than even on sheep. And a lot of dogs, I talk about gather, not because gather to me is putting stock together. And again, depends on the stock. talking to a fella a few months ago, and we were talking about black cattle, cows and calves, how hard they were on dogs around here, and he does a lot of work. And he said, I take my dogs, he said, in this one paddock, he said, and there's a lot of hills and it's a flat down there. And he said, there's usually a few cows and calves down on the flat, you know, and a lot of them are up in the scrub. And he said, I let my dogs go around these ones on the flat. He said, and they start bawling and trying to get my dogs. And he said, those other cattle, they just come out of the woodwork, run down there to where the fight is, because a lot of black cattle are like that. They'll, you know, they all come together. And he said, as soon as they start all come down the hills, he said, I call the dogs out of it. He said, and then I take the cattle away. So they basically, there's a ruckus, you know. Not all cattle will do that, but, you know, a lot of times, because I was saying to him how, you know, got some cows and calves, you know, black cows and calves, and, you know, it's not usually the one the dog's fighting that gets them, it's their mate. Comes in and T-bones the dog, and that's when he told me that story. He said, I'll go to this one place. He said, and that's what we do, create a ruckus, and they all come out of the woodwork, and that's how he gathers them. So
different method, horses for courses.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that happens everywhere, and he's got handy dogs, but he said that's the best way to use them in that paddock. So
like burleying, right? Just throw some bait out there. There's like a bit of burley. Just throw some bait out there.
Yeah, and there's a
come back in and watch them
gather. So yeah, you know, it's again, to me, they're just tools to do a job. And you know, I've had people ring me. Well, I had a fella ring me a while ago about, you know, a lot of burr country and that, and he was, you know, after something to get goats, and I more or less said, look, you know, I wouldn't be. He saw one of my videos and wondered if I had anything for sale, and I said, I don't think they're going to suit what you want anyway. You know, I said, you're better off finding something in like that works the sort of country you're working, and trying to do some homework and find out who's got handy dogs for that, and then go source one from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, that's,
and you mentioned trialing a few times tonight. Have you done much trialing?
Look, I do a few at the end of each year, and I want to do more of it now. And, you know, it's to me, it's a sport in itself, and you require a certain sort of animal to do that. And I'm not saying that animal won't do general work, but again, it'll become a specialised deal. And I've been through that with the cutting horses. You know, the people would say, oh, you know, geez, you wouldn't want to have to ride that horse all day. And I said, well, I don't. I said, they go in there and cut out, and they can win 100,000.
Yeah.
You know, if they're good enough. So I see trialing as the same. It's a sport, and you know, you need to, you know, be it catalogue trialing or everything. I mean, the nature of our catalogue trials, the cattle are usually pretty well handled, you know, for the trial. Otherwise, people don't keep rocking up. So you don't need, you know, a real rough dog. You need a dog, like I said, that's got presence, and a dog that stock are comfortable with. You know, that's the animal. If you're going to go be successful trialing, that's the animal that you better go looking for. And so yeah, I want to do that as I get older. And I did a bit of trialing when I was probably 22, and they all told me I was about 30 years too early. They said you should still be riding horses. And he said, this is what you do when you can't ride horses. So I'm getting to that age now where I'll, you know, want to, you know, develop a little, and I'll probably hunt that more than just general work dogs, you know, and whether it's 3 sheep or like if they had ISDS trialing here, that's what I'd really love to do. But, you know, you put a lot of time and work into, and I did with a few dogs into where you could cross drive them. I'm not saying at the standard that they do in the UK at all, but, you know, if we had those contests here, that'd be something that would really interest me. But we don't, so you've got to kind of go with what we got. And like I said, the catalogue trials, cattle are usually pretty broke, and they rerun them a lot of times, and they pull the bad ones out. And, you know, so, you know, you don't need that hard biting dog. Most times, if your dog's got to be biting them, you ain't going to do any good anyway. You know, you need a dog with power, though. That's what I said, that can get right up there with power without actually having to bite, and just have what I call a defense bite, meaning if the cattle come at him, he'll grab them, but he won't go
to
to
the spur ruckus.
Yeah.
Keep his stock settled.
Yeah. And some dogs have an ability to do that. As I said, they've got that presence, and I don't always think that's just a lot about training. I think there's something, as I said, I see it with the cutting horses. Horses that cattle can be really bad, and they'll always find a good one. I think, geez, that guy's good. He can always find a good cow in there. And then you go see him with another horse. It doesn't happen with that horse. He's comes back to the pack. So definitely the good ones are good.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about that. And that's what we're all after, I guess. Like, whether it's mustering, yard work with sheep, cattle, finding goats, whatever. A good dog's a good dog, as long as it's in that operation.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Question come through from Joe Levin. He's asked, "Hi Rob, when selecting a dog or horse to breed, have you found desirable traits that are repeated within the family multiple times are more reliable than simply breeding to an outright champion?"
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, you'll see that. And again, I've noticed it more in the horses. It's you see a lot of traits get carried down through that bloodline, and that's when I say you can skip a generation, meaning that particular, say, animal isn't as good as may have been, but it still carries those traits. And then if you breed another animal with those traits to it, off you go again.
Yeah.
No doubt. That's a fact.
So, like for your horses, for example, you'd rather see something with, a list of good quality, whether they be competition horses or just good lines through them, rather than something that, has nothing behind it and a good champion.
Yeah, the freak. And what I find today is there's good breeding in a lot of animals now, like in the horses, and even you look at the dogs. But that I say that freak that probably excels over what it should have been if you look at its family tree. Yeah, a lot of times you're going to struggle for it to. You love to own it, but it might not be your best breeding animal.
Yeah.
And so without a doubt, it's important. That pedigree is still important. I don't like to be frivolous about that. It's still important. I was just saying that the specific, I don't want to. I'm not saying even then because an animal is good, it won't breed. I'm not trying to say that either. I'm just saying there isn't any guarantee, in that area. But there's a guarantee with pedigree.
Yes.
Eventually, it might skip out. And then I talked to a few fellas that bred chooks actually, and there was a lot of what they call sex link breeding. Where the males were better than the females in those certain lines, and vice versa. And I've noticed that a lot with horses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm imagining it probably happens with dogs too. I don't have enough experience as far as in the dogs to say that, but it'd be the same. Like a lot of the stuff we did with our horses, I learned a lot off people that bred chooks.
Yeah.
And it related into the horses. I can name a bunch of them when I say sex link breeding, that the males were going to be the ones that were going to be the best.
Yeah.
Out of that cross, or the females. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you still see it today. Yeah.
And then what do you think as to, mare or bitch has over their progeny opposed to the stallion or dog?
Look, I'd still rather have the strength in the female line.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if you've got a strong female line, you can often breed to we breed and I do it with dogs too, to what you might call a speculator, meaning he's a nice dog but hasn't had the chance to throw many pups. And I'll still bet on if you're breeding a good bitch to that dog, you got a better chance of success. And the horses are the same. I've always been more interested in the bottom side, and it's funny because in our game, in the horse game, all I ever talk about is the size.
That's my next question. Why? And in anything we do these days, like you're always looking at the size, and the size are worth big money and whatnot. Why? Because they're getting over more bitches or more mares.
Well, I think that's the thing, you know. In the States, they can, you know, that mare, I guess, too, can, you know, even with embryo, might only get 3 foals. That stallion can get 100, maybe more each season.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, if you like, there's more dollars. If you've got that gun stallion, there's more money to be made from him.
Yeah. It's all just marketing, isn't it, really?
Yeah. But the secret to a successful stallion is attracting the right mares.
Yeah.
And the secret to probably a good dog is attracting the right bitches. If he breeds enough good bitches, all of a sudden people will say, shit, he's a sire, that dog.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And sometimes you've got to look at percentages, like just because a dog or a stallion has, you know, let's say 3,000 progeny on the ground, just pulling a number, but only, you know, 20% of them are good. But you get a stallion or a dog that's only had 10 and more than 50% of them are good. Well, you've got to look at averages as well.
I have 2 different theories, or another theory on that. You know, we've seen a lot of stallions that are produced in this country, what I call a good, consistent article. But in our game, and probably I'd be the same with my dogs, I'll take 10 duds to 1 superstar.
Yeah.
Than 10, pretty good dogs.
Why is that?
Because people only remember the superstars. It's like a lotto. People enter lotto all the time. They're not looking for third division or second division. They enter lotto, and they'll keep entering lotto because you know what they want.
Yeah,
they want the big prize. And I know that with the cutting, like, you know, you can make the finals, which is hard enough to make, but there's only one that takes 100,000 home, you know, each time. And I guess when we breed, we're after the $100,000 one. So usually if that horse or dog has bred that many individuals, like you said, there's a reason he got that many. So it's not that easy to have a dog or a stallion breed that many animals. So statistics, you know, and statistics can be read however you want to read them. You know, if you're smart, you can make statistics work for you. I see it all the time on Facebook.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
You can make them work for you, and you finish reading it, you think, shit, that's right, isn't it? But then if you look at it and you think of it a different way, you think, but.
Yeah.
You know, I still think stats are good, but it comes down to what we said about having too much friggin' knowledge sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you've lived around as long as me, you can, it's just, I don't know if I'm not trying to be cynical either, because, you know, but it's just the way things are, you know. Sometimes, like I said, ignorance is bliss, I reckon. You know, a good part of what you do, if you believe in what you're doing, it'll work more times than it won't.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you lose the belief, you know, and I know that from showing horses, if you believe, that was one of the reasons I retired from cutting. I just believed that my day was done. I wasn't going to get any better. And I, you know, there's other things I wanted to do in life, you know, and that I believe I could do. And if you're riding down there thinking, I'm a bit past my prime, it's time to get out. You know, in the cutting game, because for me, it was a business too. It's not like it's just pleasure of riding down there. You're taking people's money to ride down across that timeline. Yeah. And if you've got that attitude going across the timeline, you shouldn't be taking people's money for doing that. You know, the dogs, it's only my money.
Yeah.
And you know, I believe I can. You know, even I believe I can breed better animals than I'm breeding now, and that's what keeps you going. You know, I'm not saying it happens all the time, and I'm not saying every litter's better. It's that I believe if I keep playing around, I'll get closer to what I want.
Yeah. Another question has just come through from Nick Hovey. He said, embryo transfer is so big in performance horses now. Would you see it as a valuable or detrimental tool in the working dog game?
You sort of got it a little bit in the working dogs because you get 8 pups or 6 pups. So it's a bit there anyway. Look, from what I know with the horses, it's helped us heaps. But there's a price to pay out. Like in the quarter horse world, genetics are that close. You know, they're that tight now, because instead of having to two things in the working world, and I'd say to be in the dog world, like, well, I did the trial down at Tamworth, and my two best bitches have got pups on them. So guess what? They weren't at the trial. They also come in season. So guess what? Can't trial them. Okay? So the horses were the same. In the day when that mare had to have a foal, if you wanted to compete her, you couldn't have her in foal.
Yeah.
A lot of times, some of our better horses in the early days, they weren't even trying to put them in foal till they were 10-year-old, because they wanted to keep working.
Yeah.
The ones they put in foal were the ones they didn't want to work. Well, we'll breed a foal. She's not much chop. We'll breed a foal out of her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so embryos help that. Okay.
Well, now you've got mares that are rising 3 and 4 that have foals on the ground.
We did that. Well, I think the horse I got second in the futurity with in 2002 was Stacey's now's first embryo. So, and her mother, his mother, I should say, went through the futurity in 98. So 98. Yeah. So basically, yeah, what, 4 years later, her first foal went through.
Yeah.
So yeah, we bred her as a 2-year-old anyway. So yeah, so what you so it's helped that way, because obviously you can do more with those good mares now. They can go get eggs out of them, and then they'll be back in the pen next year showing again.
Yeah, which put your progeny up in price and everything if they're doing well, and it's all a cycle, isn't it?
It is, and you can get through more. You know, the dogs, I guess you can say at least they have 8 pups. So in a litter, whereas a horse has 1 to choose from. So, and my experiences have been that not all pups are the same, even in full brothers and sisters. So you got a choice there. I don't know the advantages of embryo transfer in dogs, other than if your bitch can't carry pups. You know what I mean? You can take an egg out of her and maybe do it. I don't know if they do it. Maybe they do. I don't see the advantages that we had with horses anyway, because your gestation period's shorter, you know. So, I mean, even though I didn't have those bitches at this particular trial, you know, probably next time I'm ready to trial, I'll both be up and running. Whereas a horse, you know, you lose a whole year, don't you? Or a year and a half if you want to let her rear the foal.
Yeah. Yeah, so, they've only got to carry it for 7 days and it's pulled out.
Yeah.
Like 7 days to opposed to a year is a big difference, isn't
it? The disadvantages are narrowing the gene pool. Because, you know, people, if you've got a good mare and you can breed, say, even 2 a year out of her, and say one's a filly, and then she can do that because she's out of the good mare, and then she can do that because she's out of the good mare, doesn't take long before they've earned the right, but those bloodlines are starting to take over your industry.
I can see how you look at it that way, but in other ways, it's also bettering your gene pool in some ways, isn't it? Because we're breeding from quality.
It is, but it's narrowing it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not, like I think I said, you know, about the horses. I said how we're riding way more better horses now. And without embryo, that wouldn't be as...
Yeah, it wouldn't be
like
happening.
You're saying, it wouldn't be happening as much.
Yeah.
But it does mean that
we got to think outside the square to widen that gene pool.
You don't keep that second tier going, you know. So and then fashion starts to dictate a lot then too. So that means lines that become unfashionable at the time for whatever reason fall by the wayside. And then I tell you, it happens in the States and everywhere at the moment. Like they let them fall by the wayside because they weren't bringing the money. And then the pendulum swung too much one way with what they've been trying to achieve. And they're starting to look back over their shoulders saying, shit, we need some of that stuff we had back there. And it's not as much of it around. You know, I talk about that in the say the cutting, and I can see it with the dogs, and the more to do with the trialing side of things probably than general mustering. But the cutters, they got those animals that were more pliable and more trainable, and they could put them around more with their feet. And they got to a place where they had some nice horses, but then they started to go out the other side to where the horses were doing everything for the horses. So they started to lose that natural instinct, if you like. In other words, the animals started to become too mechanical.
Yeah.
And they're doing that in the cutting horse industry now. They're looking for them cowie bred horses. And the thing was, the two things tend to pull against each other, meaning those which we talked about with those natural thinking dogs to the mechanical dogs. The more cowie your horse was, or the more instinct, the less easy it was to manipulate him.
Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about with the dogs too. See, the more natural and self-thinking that dog is, the harder it is to manipulate him.
Harder to get in its
Start
head.
to breed that manipulation in at the expense of losing a bit of that natural instinct. And somewhere in the middle, there's a great balance between the two, but it's hard to stay in the middle. You tend to swing out one side, then all of a sudden you've got animals that you've got to do everything for them. And
Yeah.
so, again, that's just understanding what you want and what you need. And sometimes, fashion, I guess things come back around, but it's harder in the breeding game because often we've let them go. Like remember when the shorts were short and that was fashion. You didn't have like if you had long pants, you're a dork. And now she's come back again where if you got short, tight pants, you're not kind of that good. You need the longer ones again.
Yeah.
And things just go around in cycles. And I think breeding's the same. They want this, and that's what's winning, so that's what everyone chases. And then if they get so far, and oh shit, we'll go back here, and just swapping and changing. It's I always look at things like it's a pendulum, and that's the same with training. Sometimes I got my dogs on me too much, and sometimes they're not doing enough for themselves. Sometimes they're doing too much for themselves and not enough on me, even in training.
Yeah.
And when you get it right in the middle, to where they're doing enough for themselves, and you can still step in, you think that's what I want. But it's not as easy to stay there as you think.
No. And that's that purple patch, right? That we're talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's it. When you get that going, and you think, geez. But I don't know if I said I hope to have some of that in the dog somewhere, but whether you can maintain it, I never managed to maintain it with the horses. But anyway.
Cool. All right, we've already spoken about those ones there, haven't we?
Yeah.
Cool. Mate, so we were talking about trialing before we got back into that. What will govern which direction you go, whether it'll be more three sheepy or more cattle, or are you going to do both?
Well, I'm going to probably play around with both, but I'll need two different sorts of dogs.
Yep.
Obviously, to do it. The directness of some of my working dogs, after talking to a few of the three sheep trialers, they need a little bit more shape in them, as they travel, and not so direct with how they move. Even though they move left and right, they need, just a different style of dog, and I'll do a few more, obviously going, with most of the trialing, and it might change if I get more time, but most of the trialing, I like to go, see what everyone's doing, work my dogs, see where I think there's areas that I can do better or need to fix up, and then I go home. I don't like to just rock up the trial the following weekend. I like to be able to go home and play around and tweak some things and get it set, and then I try again.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with it. I've only done 2-3 sheep trials, and but it's not boring to me because I like to watch how they all go about working their dogs, and I find things that I think are good and not so good. And then, of course, stock can make some dogs look unreal on the day, and then different stock 3 trials later, the same. It's not even that the dog's got any worse. It's just the stock don't fit the dog as good. And that's interesting too. So I intend to try and pursue both, but like everything, when there's a cattle dog trial, there's a sheepdog trial.
Yeah.
When there's a cutting, there's a sheepdog trial and a cattle dog trial.
And they're local.
Yeah, it's it's pretty busy. And then if you want a camp draft as well, basically you'd need like to be in three places at once. So we'll see. And I don't, again, it's my retirement, so I don't know if I'll be governed any one way. I'll just go by gut, what interests me at the time.
Is there something you'd like to achieve in a trial? Is there a trial you'd like to do well at?
No, it's probably, and it was the same with the horses. No, I'm hoping I got enough time to maybe breed some dogs that I think are, whatever I choose to be at 3 sheep or cattle that I think are going to be really good dogs. I'd like to leave something, and that's sort of what I more set out to achieve with the horse side of things too. And hopefully your family, one of the family members will pick it up and go on with it. More so.
Sorry.
Yeah, more so than just win this trial or that trial. I always try to say to kids and stuff that have come about the horses. If you think your life's going to fall into place because you win the futurity, you're dreaming.
You need another goal.
It's a moment in time.
Yeah.
Then you want to win it again. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm not saying don't work towards it, but to win those things, to me, it's still a shallow. To me, if that's what your life's about, I think it's a pretty shallow life. Because records will be broken. The great fella at the moment, 40 years' time will be another great fella.
Yeah.
Come along, you know what I mean? And if it's what you really like to do, and some people I say are just proper competitors and they love it, and that's great, and I'm probably not geared like that. I don't not like to do good, but I'm not a driven competitor like some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still want to enjoy what I'm doing, and if I go to compete, I try to win, but it's not the be all and end all of, like, it's like, not like if I don't win, that was buggered,
Yeah,
like,
throw all your lollies out.
To me, it's still about the animals.
Yeah.
It's still about trying to produce that top animal, and I always think you got a top animal when you make mistakes and they cover for you.
Yeah.
That's when you've got a good animal, and that's when your balance is right between that pendulum.
Yeah.
And that comes from, I read in a Scott Lithgow book on working dogs, and he said in there somewhere, I haven't read it in years, the book, I think I've still got a copy somewhere, and he said, I don't want a dog so intimidated that it won't intelligently disobey.
Yeah.
And I thought that probably sums up what I've tried to achieve with my horses and with my dogs, and I don't get it right all the time, but that's always, I think, if I can get an animal to work like that, and the right animal, that means you've got to have a good animal. That to me is perfection.
It's funny, I was talking about intelligent disobedience today, and the person I was talking to is like, what? But it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, it does. So to me, that describes having an animal thinking for itself. And the intimidation part is you basically handling him. Like you can be intimidating by making him go here and whistle him and he'll skid to a stop. To me, that it's impressive to watch. You run a dog, and he goes, shoo. But, that's just mechanics. That's all that is, and that's great. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story is when you send him and he finds his own distance and he slows himself up to get control, and you haven't even whistled. Like, that's the other side of the story.
Yeah.
And then it's getting a blend between the two. And, you know, a lot of trialing, if, you know, like a lot of the cattle dog trials now, they're just big yard dog trials, like they're done in arenas. So, you know, half the time you don't even get to get your dog round behind them. You've got to meet them somewhere, because if they come out and they start coming down, you can't, you know, you're off course by the time your dog goes right round behind them. And, you know, so you're just meeting them and steering them, basically, you know, in a lot of the cattle dog trials. And it'd be easy to say, oh, you know, should have more work orientated trials. And that's good, you know, and I've done it, you know, one or two like that. Trouble is, that's like trying to get people wrapped up in Test cricket again compared to one dayers or Big Bash.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, but, you know, whether you know, I know that there's a lot in Test cricket that people don't understand, but a lot of people, you know, they love to go to the Big Bash. It's a good night out.
Oh.
And trialing gets that way. You're not going to, well, even the sheepdog trialing, like after catalogue trialing, it seems like you got like a heap of time. Because like every run's 15 minutes or something, 14 or 15 minutes a run. You know, like I think, oh, I'm 5 away. Shit, I better get ready. And, you know, like in a catalogue trial, you know, usually 5 or 6 minute runs at most. So you're 15 minutes away. 5 in a sheepdog trial, you got time for a bloody couple of beers and bloody cut lunch before you get I mean, it's good. I don't mind that myself, the pace, and I know that's how it is. But how many dogs are you going to get through in a day with 15 minute runs? Yeah. And it's the same with the cutting compared to the camp drafting, you know, like they zip through in the camp drafting, bang, 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 bang. Cutting horse, 2.5 minutes to show your horse. We take 40 minutes to settle each herd. Like, it's a long day. So, you know, there's no doubt with the trialing, you know, it's going to be more of a Big Bash style tournament, which is not, you know, most of the trialing originated from real work, but it's not close to it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, that's not to say a work dog can't be a trial dog, but to be honest, he's going to be better at one or the other. You know, probably the dog I've had the most success with as a trial dog, she's, well, she wasn't named in the 2 go-to dogs to go do the job.
Yeah.
She'd do it. Yeah. But she's probably, but if you talk about trial dogs and you say you can only take one, she'd be the first one on the ute.
Yeah.
So,
mate, is there someone that you'd like to see us sit down and have a chat with on Dog Talk?
yeah, I'd read that and I was putting it, there'd be a few, but I even think, I tell you, I don't know if you have, so I reckon Craig Irvine would be a good fellow to talk to.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Thank you.
There's probably a heap of others. I'm not trying to pick on one or the other, but.
Oh, mate, you can have a think about that and send me a message anytime or give me a phone call. I had a chat, right?
Yep.
Right. Cool, mate. And, mate, there was a few questions there tonight. Was there a question that stood out for you? And they will win a bag of Enduro high-energy food for working dogs with Real Kangaroo, mate.
So is it on the amount of questions Nick asked or the you reckon?
That's where your statistics come in.
Yeah. You can read them however you want, you know. I'll let you choose it. You guys
mate, we can't do that. We might. That would be biased.
Sorry?
Would be biased if we picked. Was there a particular question?
Well, I didn't mind a few of them.
Yeah.
You know, like probably that's a question really. I guess I'm just trying to remember back on them, but that's a question that's almost your viewers. You need to get your viewers no, seriously, because it's what interests them most. You know, with the response. You know, I thought it was probably like Joe's question was good about probably for people wanting to breed about the you know, the genetics.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, but I don't know what everyone's take is on it. Like it's probably something I'd sort of glossed over and hadn't talked about. I'd sort of talked around it, I guess.
Yeah.
And he probably put it a little clearer in saying that.
That's all right, mate. It's a question that you like the most. So, Joe Levin, bag of dog feed coming your way, mate. Thank you for that. And Rob, for you jumping on tonight, mate, there's a bag coming your way as well, mate. We really appreciate the time you set aside for us.
Yeah, that's not a problem, mate. Pleasure.
That's all right. Laura's not going to let you get away that easy.
One last question. Would you rather fight one duck the size of a horse or 20 horses the size of ducks?
Well, I guess if I'm going to go down, I'd go down to the horses.
It's fair enough.
Plenty of experience, right?
I was going to say,
What's 20?
Yeah, you'd need to. I did have a little bit of experience with a duck on the pond there the other day that my dog was trying to bloody run down on the dam. But the dog was a bit of a no-show, so I figure those ducks can be dangerous, I reckon. Went down there trying to track it down all bloody for an hour, and it'd disappear under the water and then pop up somewhere else, and then off he'd go after it again. And
I had one do that, and it was swimming in the dam though. She just kept swimming back and forth. I'm thinking you're going to drown soon.
Yeah, the dog will drown before the duck gets tired. So I'll take the horses on that. They haven't killed me yet.
Rob, thank you very much for your time tonight, mate. We really appreciate it. To all our viewers watching today, thank you very much for some fantastic questions. There's some questions that came up that we had already spoken about. So thanks for that as well. And please remember, we learn every day, and the day we stop learning will be a sad one for all of us.
Thank you.
No worries.
Cheers.